King Tut. Peace, it's your brother, Don Obuadi, also known as Professor H, www.africancreationist.com, man. This is actually something that I've been wanting to talk about for a minute, and I've just been so busy, man. I haven't really had the time to do the video like I wanted to. So I'm actually doing this in my car, so hopefully the audio turns out all right, you know what I'm saying, and I can use it. But the topic I want to talk about is race and genetics. And it's really being spurred by the fact that recently, I'll say recently meaning August of this year, the article was released, or it was made public, officially public, that they did the DNA test of King Tut's paternal DNA, meaning from his father's side, right? And they found that his paternal DNA is shared with 50% of the men in Western Europe, right? And so, you know, obviously a lot of Western European men rejoice, hey, yeah, you know, we're related to King Tut. And people who are proponents of racial ideologies and theories are like, yay, King Tut was Caucasian. That's a flowing reason, and I'm gonna get into that a little bit later. Now, I want to make a point here. Race and genetics are not the same thing. You know what I mean? When you study how race is determined, it's a rather speculative, subjective field based on determinations of skin color, hair texture, and what they call phenotype, appearance, right? And so, you know what I mean? It's very subjective. You know what I mean? Genetics is rather more objective, right? And, you know, just like alchemy was the precursor to modern chemistry, and metaphysics was a precursor to modern physics, you know, you can say that racial ideologies and theories was a precursor to modern genetics, modern human genetics. And so it's really outdated at this point in time. However, what people do, people try to carry those speculative, subjective classifications that were determined by race into the realm of the more objective, operative realm of genetics, and then they try to superimpose the racial classifications onto the genetic classifications. And whereas there may be some overlap, it's not 100%. It's not 100%. Like, you can't 100% say, okay, a person of this race is going to have this genetics, and a person of this genetics is going to have this race. And that's the argument that's being made in the case of King Tut. So basically, my argument is that race does not determine genetics, and genetics does not determine race. There may be some overlap, but it's not 100%. All right? So now, King Tut shares DNA that's common with 50% of Western European men. And they've taken that fact to say, okay, well, King Tut must be Caucasian. Stop. Caucasian is a racial determination based on subjective measures of skin type, phenotype, and hair texture. Based on all the depictions of King Tut during King Tut's time, racially, we can determine race from that, because race is not genetics. Skin color, hair texture, and phenotype, he would not be Caucasian. His skin complexion, based on the depictions that he made and that were made of him during that time, his skin color alone rules him out from being Caucasian, right? Secondly, something that people don't talk about, but is an interesting fact in the discussion of genetics and race, is that of all the men in the United States who have been tested genetically, who identify racially as African American, right? 35%, over 1/3 of African American men share paternal DNA with Western Europe. So now, if 35% of men who would be considered African American racially share genetics with Western European men, does that make them Caucasian? Does that make those 35% of African American men Caucasian because they share paternal DNA with Western Europe? Of course not. And that's my entire point. Marcus Garvey and Martin Luther King, who anybody looking at them and making a racial determination would say, oh yes, they're black, they're African American, right? Racially. Their DNA was tested. Marcus Garvey Marcus Garvey, one of the most militant black leaders, I shouldn't say militant, but pro-black black leaders, right? His paternal DNA came out of Western Europe. His maternal, his mother's DNA came out of Africa. You know, we actually come from the same tribe, the Balanta of Guinea-Bissau. But his paternal DNA came from Western Europe, just like King Tut. So now, does that make Marcus Garvey Caucasian? Martin Luther King, the same thing. He is a African American, but his DNA comes out of Western Europe. So you cannot use genetics and race. You cannot use genetics to determine race, period. It can't, right? Let's talk about another one. Hitler, Adolf Hitler, one of the most militant pro-white figures. They tested his DNA, and it came from his paternal DNA. His father's DNA came out of Africa. What? So does that make Adolf Hitler black? You know what I'm saying? So you cannot take a genetic result and try to superimpose the subjective race classifications on top of it. You know what I mean? That's my point. That's the point of this video. You know, moving forward and going forward, you know, in the future, I already know, man, racial classifications are going to be abolished because it's just too subjective. And people are going to start identifying by genetics. Because when you start getting into genetics, you get into chromosomes, and you're getting into who and what people are in reality, right? And so that's it now, man. I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of racial comments on this video, but, you know, I wanted to talk about this subject, you know, again, African Creation Energy, www.africancreationenergy.com. And that's all from now. Peace.